long before asphalt carved a ribbon along Saint Lucia's western cliffs. The bays of Soufrière, Ancillary and Canneries were lifelines sustained by the sea. Soufrière, a French colonial town, thrived on cocoa and sugar shipped from nearby estates. The only shore link was water. By the 1800s, West Coast villages traded, worshipped, and went to school thanks to small craft, skimming reefs, and guided by the tides. Even in the middle of the 20th century, canneries stood apart, accessible only by mule paths or by boats treading the surf's breakers. Everything changed in the 1950s. Crews with bulldozers carved the track from cul-de-sac through Ancillary and onto Soufrière. Asphalt followed, turning mud and dust into an all-weather road. Trucks began hauling bananas and charcoal. Buses linked villages to Castries, and midwives reached mothers in hours instead of an entire day. By the close of the 1960s, the coast was no longer a chain of isolated hamlets, but a pulsing corridor of farms, beaches, village charm, and a market town. Through the 1970s and 80s, the West Coast Road grew sturdier. Engineers added culverts, retaining walls and small bridges. Minibuses transformed it into a moving marketplace and meeting place. While tourism blossomed, guest houses and restaurants welcomed visitors heading to the Pitons or the Sulphur Springs.
We have here the West Coast Road Improvement Project Canneries to Soufrière section, opened by the Prime Minister, the Right Honourable John Compton, and the British High Commissioner, His Excellency Richard Thomas, CMG. Funds were provided under the British Aid Programme to the Caribbean.
Heavy rains and landslides, sharp bends and potholes tested drivers. International partners joined Saint Lucia in the late 80s and 90s to rehabilitate long stretches, giving the route a modern profile by the turn of the millennium. But there was still one choke point: the climb over the Morne to Castries. Every vehicle from the west and south had to crawl through the city center before heading north or east. To solve this, planners proposed a bold bypass, a highway cut through the hills from Castries' outskirts to cul-de-sac.
This highway, which has generally been referred to as the Tunnel Road, is indeed a major addition to our island's road network. It significantly improves the road link from the city of Castries through the cul-de-sac valley to points further south.
Backed by loans from the OPEC Fund and QAT Fund, Saint Lucia launched the project in the mid-1990s.
It is an important role as the economy of Saint Lucia is dependent on a road network that is well maintained, safe to drive on, and adequate for its purpose. The pillars of the economy, tourism, agriculture, manufacturing, and the distributive trades depend on the quality of our road infrastructure for their viability.
Engineers blasted twin tunnels, built deep embankments, and laid just over 5 kilometers of modern carriageway. In December 1999, the new route opened, officially named the Millennium Highway, early in the next year. For commuters, it slashed up to half an hour from daily trips and spared residential districts the rumble of heavy trucks. Farmers, exporters, and tour operators finally had a direct, reliable link between the capital and the island's western and southern districts. By 2020, however, both the Millennium Highway and the West Coast Road were showing their age. 2 decades of trucks, buses, and tropical downpours had worn grooves into the pavement. Climate change brought heavier rains and more frequent floods, underscoring the need for a corridor built to higher standards. That year, the government of Saint Lucia, backed by the Caribbean Development Bank and a major grant from the UK Caribbean Infrastructure Fund, launched the Millennium Highway and West Coast Road Reconstruction Project, the most comprehensive road investment in the island's history.
To build a strong and better nation, the Ministry of Infrastructure at this time demonstrates that not only can we do what is necessary to build and to maintain our infrastructure, but to build better and to reinstate the confidence that the people once had.
Valued at more than $50 million, it set out to rebuild nearly 40 kilometers of highway from Castries to Soufrière. Work was divided into 4 main lots. Lot 1 targeted the Millennium Highway itself. Contractors resurfaced the entire carriageway, repairing tunnel linings and rebuilding retaining walls that hold the route above steep ravines. A new roundabout at cul-de-sac replaced the congested junction, giving a smooth transition between the bypass and the coast. Sidewalks, bus bays, and bright lane markings now make the drive safer for motorists and pedestrians. Beyond cul-de-sac, Lot 2A covers the road to Ancillary. Here, crews are widening curves and installing a new drainage network to cope with torrential rain. The centerpiece is the replacement of the Ancillary Bridge. The old 1971 span was too narrow and vulnerable to flooding. A temporary bypass bridge, opened in early 2025, keeps traffic flowing while engineers pour the foundations of a 2-lane concrete bridge, complete with walkways and utility ducts. South of Ancillary, Lot 3A is reconstructing the rugged stretch to Canaries. Workers have stabilized cliffs with reinforced concrete retaining walls, laid culverts under the pavement, and carpeted the first section of a smoother, wider carriageway. The last package, Lot 3B, runs from Canaries to Soufrière. This is the steepest and narrowest part of the corridor, where rainwater once carved gullies into the road and buses inch past one another above sheer drops. Excavators are cutting new benches into the hillside, while teams rebuild the surface layer by layer. Wider shoulders and guardrails will keep the descent into Soufrière safer for taxis, minibuses, and tourists heading to the pitons. Across all lots, the project applies climate-resilient design, stronger asphalt mixes, deeper foundations, and slope protection rated for extreme rainfall. Modern signage, reflectors, and crash barriers meet international standards, while new sidewalks and pullouts improve safety for pedestrians and minibus passengers. Utility conduits are being buried beneath the verges to safeguard water and fiber optic lines that once dangled over drains. The works also include a livelihood restoration plan to support vendors and residents whose frontage is being affected by road widening or slope repairs. Temporary access roads, footpaths, and community briefings keep villages connected while construction advances. When completed, the upgraded route will provide a direct, resilient link from the capital through cul-de-sac, Roseau, Ancillary, Canaries, and Soufrière. Travel times will drop, landslides risk will shrink, and buses and trucks will have a wider, safer thoroughfare. For the tourism sector, the new roads promise reliable access to beaches, dive sites, and hiking trails, For the communities, it means faster trips to schools, clinics, and jobs.
Every solution, remember always that the prime responsibility of building this nation is ours.
The story of St. Lucia's west coast is one of movement. First by sea, then by rough track, later by asphalt and tunnels. The work now underway secures that legacy for a new generation. From the Millennium Highway to Soufrière, engineers are building modern pavement. They are crafting a corridor that bridges centuries of connection while paving the way for decades of growth, safety, and resilience.